The thing I remember most clearly is the silence the snow makes when it stops. Not the wind. The wind is always there, somewhere, even on the calmest nights, a low animal breath against the steel siding of the station. No. I mean the moment the snow itself goes quiet. When the storm presses down so completely that the air thickens and the world holds its breath, and you realize you have not heard your own heartbeat in some time, and you cannot tell whether that is because it has stopped, or because something nearby is louder than it. That was the night I went out to check the eastern array, and I found my own boot prints in the snow ahead of me. Not behind me. Ahead. A clean line of them, the same tread, the same size, leading away from the station and into the whiteout, into the dark beyond the floodlights, made by feet that had walked there minutes before I arrived. I had not walked that way. I had come from the door. I stood there with the wind tearing at my hood and the radio hissing nothing in my ear, and I followed those prints with the beam of my flashlight, and they went out maybe 40 meters, into the storm, and then they stopped. They did not turn around. They did not double back. They simply ended mid-stride, the last print pressed deep as though whoever made it had taken a long step and never come down. And the snow that should have been falling into them, filling them, softening them the way fresh snow does in seconds at that temperature, the snow was avoiding them. Falling everywhere else. Not there. I want to tell you I turned around and went inside and wrote it up in the log. I did go inside. But there was no entry for that night. I checked later. The whole shift is gone. 11 hours that I lived through, that I remember the cold of, and the official record skips from the afternoon reading straight to the next morning, as if I had slept through the storm that nearly killed me. I worked at that station for 14 months. I am going to tell you what I can. I need you to understand before I start that I am not certain all of it happened, and I am not certain all of it happened to me, and that uncertainty is the part that has never gone away. Let me begin with the day I arrived. That part, at least, I trust. The station did not have a name. It had a designation, a string of letters and a number that I am not going to repeat, partly because I signed something promising I wouldn't, and partly because saying it out loud still makes the back of my neck go cold. On the paperwork it was listed as a remote automated meteorological monitoring facility. Northern Alaska, far above the Brooks Range, in a stretch of country with no road that appears on any public map. You did not drive there. You were flown in. I took the job because I was 34 and I had run out of other things. I had a degree in atmospheric science I had stopped using, a marriage I had stopped maintaining, and a bank account that reminded me of both every time I looked at it. The listing was vague and the pay was not. 6-month contract, renewable. Room and board. Total isolation. They wanted someone who could log data, maintain equipment, and tolerate being alone with 3 other people at the edge of the inhabited world. I told the recruiter on the phone that solitude didn't bother me. She was quiet for a second. Then she said, "It's not the solitude that gets people. It's the company." I thought she was making a joke about the other staff. I laughed. She didn't. The flight in was the longest 4 hours of my life up to that point. A small twin-engine plane, the kind where you can hear every change in the engine and feel every pocket of cold air, and below us nothing but white. I had expected the Arctic to be beautiful. It is not beautiful in the way photographs suggest. From the air it is an absence. A flat, endless erasure of everything, broken only by the black thread of a frozen river or the occasional dark scatter of rock the wind had stripped bare. There were no towns. No lights. No roads. After the second hour I stopped looking out the window because the sameness had begun to feel like falling. The pilot didn't talk much. When we finally began to descend I saw the station for the first time, and my initial thought was that it looked too small to matter. A cluster of low buildings, gray and rust-streaked, connected by enclosed walkways, half buried in drifted snow. A radio mast. 2 radar domes, white spheres that from above looked like eggs laid in the ice. A landing strip that was really just a flattened stretch of frozen ground marked with poles. And around all of it, in every direction, that same white nothing going on until it became the sky. The pilot brought us down hard. As we taxied, he said the only full sentence I'd get from him. "Don't go out in the bad ones," he said. "No matter what they tell you the procedure is. The procedure's for them, not for you." I asked him what he meant. He didn't answer. He helped me unload my 2 bags, climb back into the plane, and was airborne again within 15 minutes. I watched the plane shrink into the white and disappear, and then I was standing alone on the ice with the wind pulling at me, and the silence came down, and I understood for the first time, physically, in my body, what I had agreed to. The cold up there is not like cold anywhere else. It is not an absence of heat. It is a presence. It has a will. It comes into you through whatever you've left exposed, and it goes looking for the warm parts of you, methodically, the way water finds a crack. Within 30 seconds my eyes were streaming and the moisture was freezing on my lashes. I could not feel my face. And it was, the chief told me later, a mild day. The chief. I'll call him Dunmore, which is not his name. He came out to meet me, a big slow man in his 50s with a beard gone mostly white, and eyes that had the particular flatness of someone who has stopped being surprised by things. He shook my hand, took one of my bags, and walked me inside without much in the way of welcome. The first thing he said to me, once we were through the airlock-style double doors and into the warmth, was, "You read the manual?" I said I'd read most of it. "Read the rest tonight. Especially the storm sections. We'll go over the routine tomorrow. Tonight just sleep. The first night's the worst. After that your body forgets it's supposed to be afraid." I thought that was a strange thing to say. I would think about it a great deal later. There were 4 of us, including me. Dunmore, the chief, who had been there longer than anyone and did not say how long. A woman named Pell, the senior technician, somewhere in her 40s, who kept the equipment running and spoke in short, flat sentences and looked at me, those first weeks, the way you look at a houseplant you don't expect to keep alive. And a younger man, Aronson, maybe 28, who handled the radio and communications and who was the only one of them who smiled. His smile, I came to realize, was not a happy thing. It was something he did with his face when he didn't know what else to do with it. The station itself was 3 main structures. The operations building, which held the control room, the radar consoles, the communications gear, and the main living quarters. A secondary building with the generators, the fuel, the water reclamation, and storage. And a third structure smaller, set apart from the other 2 by maybe 80 meters of open ground, connected to operations by an enclosed walkway. I asked Dunmore what was in the third building, that first day. "Old equipment," he said. "Don't worry about it." The walkway to it had a door that locked. Only Dunmore and Pell had keys. I noticed that the first week. I tried not to think about it. The routine, when it started, was almost a relief. There is something about procedure that holds a person together. Every 6 hours, around the clock, somebody took a full set of readings: temperature, barometric pressure, wind speed and direction, humidity, visibility, cloud cover where there was any to see. We logged them by hand in a physical book, in pen, and then entered them into the system, and then at set intervals we relayed batches of data south by radio to a relay station that forwarded them on to wherever they went. I never learned where they went. None of us did. You'd think that would bother a person. It did a little at first. Then it became one of the many things you stopped asking about. The control room was the heart of it. Low ceilings, banks of monitors, the radar consoles with their slow green sweep, and over all of it the flat dead hum of fluorescent lights that never went off, day or night, because there was no day or night for most of the year. In the deep winter the sun didn't rise at all. You lived your whole life under that fluorescent hum, in that cold blue-white light, and your body lost track of time so completely that the clocks became the only thing tethering you to the idea that hours were passing at all. I want to describe the sound of the place, because the sound is most of what I remember. Under everything there was the generator, a low industrial throb that came up through the floor and through the soles of your boots and into your teeth, so constant that you stopped hearing it until it changed. There was the wind, of course, always, in 100 different voices depending on its speed and direction. There was the click and tick of the heating system. There was the soft electronic sweep of the radar. And there was the radio. The radio was never fully silent. Even when no one was transmitting, the channels carried a low wash of static, a sound like the sea heard from very far away, rising and falling, and after a while you began to hear things in it. Everyone does. It's a known psychological phenomenon. The brain is a pattern finder, and it will manufacture voices out of noise to keep itself occupied. I knew that. I told myself that a great many times. That first week, Aronson showed me the communications protocols. How to format a report. How to handle the relay. The frequencies we used, the times we transmitted, the call signs. And then, near the end, almost as an afterthought, he showed me a second log book. A thin one, kept separate from the main weather log, in a drawer that locked. Some events go in here instead, he said. I asked what kind of events. He didn't look at me. He was tidying the desk, squaring the edges of paper that were already square. You'll know them, he said. When one comes through, Dunmore decides whether it goes in the main log or this one. If it goes in this one, it doesn't get relayed south. It stays here. And we don't talk about it on the open channel. I asked, reasonably I thought, why a weather event wouldn't get reported. Aronson smiled the smile that wasn't a smile. Some weather, he said, isn't ours to report. Then he closed the drawer and changed the subject, and that was the first crack. The first place where the smooth surface of the ordinary showed me there was something underneath it. I told myself it was bureaucracy. Classified airspace, maybe, military interests, some Cold War leftover protocol that had never been rescinded. There are 1,000 boring explanations for a locked drawer. I held on to all of them. For about a month, the boring explanations held. The first storm that wasn't reported came in my 6th week. I had by then settled into the rhythm of the place. My body had, as Dunmore predicted, forgotten to be afraid. I slept when the schedule said sleep and worked when it said work and ate the same rotation of meals from the same cans and packets, and learned the particular boredom of a job that requires constant attention but almost never anything to attend to. I had learned the others a little. Dunmore was kind in a remote way and never spoke about himself. Pell warmed by perhaps 2 degrees and let me help her with the equipment maintenance, which I came to enjoy, the simple honest work of keeping machines alive in a place that wanted them dead. Aronson talked the most and said the least. I learned that he had been there 19 months and that his contract had ended twice and that both times he had renewed it, and when I asked him why, he looked confused, as though it had not occurred to him that leaving was a thing a person could decide to do. The storm announced itself on the radar first. I was on the overnight watch, though night meant only the clock, since outside it was the same starless dark it had been for weeks. The radar sweep picked up a system to the northwest, a large one, and I logged its approach the way I'd been trained, noting the time and the bearing and the apparent size. It was moving fast. Faster than the wind models said it should. I noted that too. When Dunmore came on at the change of watch, I showed him. He stood in front of the console for a long time, longer than the situation seemed to call for, and the green sweep passed over the shape of the storm again and again, and I watched his face in the radar light go very still. Get Pell, he said. His voice had changed. Quieter. And don't relay the morning batch. Not until I clear it. I got Pell. I didn't relay the morning batch. And then the 3 of them did something I had not seen before. They began to prepare the station for the storm in a way that had nothing to do with weather. They closed and locked the interior shutters over the windows, heavy steel panels I had assumed were for protecting the glass from flying ice. They sealed the door to the walkway leading to the 3rd building, and Pell checked the seal twice. Aronson put on a headset and tuned the radio to a frequency I didn't recognize, low on the band, and sat in front of it with a notepad, writing nothing, just listening. And Dunmore turned off most of the lights in the control room, leaving only the glow of the instruments, so that the room went from the usual flat fluorescent white to a dim red and green dark. I asked what was happening. Dunmore said without turning around. Storm procedure. You'll learn it. For tonight you sit. You don't go out. You don't open anything. And if you hear the radio do something strange, you let Aronson handle it. You understand me?" I said I understood, though I didn't. The storm hit 2 hours later. And it was wrong from the first minute. I had been in storms by then. Real ones. The Arctic produces weather that would terrify anyone from a temperate climate, winds that can knock you flat, cold that can kill exposed skin in under a minute, whiteouts so total that men have frozen to death 20 feet from their own doors because they could not find them. I had logged those. They were violent and dangerous and entirely natural, and you could feel, in your animal body, that they were natural. They were the world being the world. This was not that. The first wrong thing was the pressure. The barometer dropped. That's normal for a storm. The pressure falls as the system approaches. But it didn't fall the way pressure falls. It dropped in steps. It would hold steady, then drop, then hold, then drop, each fall sharp and sudden, like something descending a staircase. I had never seen a barometer do that. Pressure doesn't move in increments. It glides. This was falling in deliberate stages, and each time it dropped my ears popped, and a low ache started behind my eyes. The second wrong thing was the wind. It rose to a scream, the way Arctic wind does, but underneath the scream there was a rhythm. A slow, regular pulse, every 9 or 10 seconds, a deep pressure against the walls of the station that made the whole structure flex and groan. Like breathing. Like something very large outside was breathing, slowly, and the station was a small thing inside its lungs. And the third wrong thing was what happened to the radio. Aronson had been sitting in front of it for 2 hours silent, the headset pressed to one ear. Around the third hour of the storm, he went rigid. I watched his hand stop moving. And then, on the open speaker, he must have switched it over, or it switched itself. I heard the static change. The wash of noise that was always there parted, the way water parts around a stone, and in the gap there was a voice. It was my voice. I want to be precise about this because it is the single most frightening thing that happened in my first months there, and I have spent a long time trying to explain it to myself. The voice on the radio was mine. Not a voice that sounded like mine. Mine. My exact pitch, my exact way of pronouncing things, the small catch I have in my speech when I'm tired. And it was reading a weather report. A full, formatted, correct weather report, temperature, pressure, wind, in my voice, in my cadence, calmly, the way I'd been trained to relay them. Except the numbers were wrong. The temperature it read was a temperature we would not have for another 2 days. I know because I logged that temperature, 2 days later, and when I did, the back of my neck went cold and I had to sit down. The voice finished the report. It said the station designation. And then it said, in my voice, perfectly calm, "Acknowledging receipt. All personnel accounted for." And the static closed over it again like nothing had happened. I looked at Aronson. He had taken off the headset. He was very pale, and he was smiling the smile that wasn't a smile. "Don't answer it," he said. "If it asks you to confirm, don't confirm. It's already got your voice. Don't give it your name." I asked him what it was. My own voice sounded strange to me, after hearing the other one. He didn't answer. Dunmore, across the room, said quietly, "Log it in the second book. Time and frequency. Nothing else." I logged it in the second book. Time and frequency. Nothing else. The storm passed in the early morning. The barometer climbed back up, in steps again, the staircase in reverse, and the breathing in the wind slowed and stopped, and the wind became ordinary wind again, and then it died entirely, and the great silence came down, the silence the snow makes when it stops. Dunmore opened the shutters. Outside, the floodlights showed fresh deep snow, smooth and untouched, going on into the dark. It looked completely normal. It looked like nothing had happened. And nowhere in the official log, the one that got relayed south, was there any record that a storm had occurred at all. The morning batch I sent, when Dunmore finally cleared it, recorded clear conditions and a steady barometer through the entire night. I asked Dunmore later, when we were alone, why. Why we didn't report it. What it was. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said something I have never forgotten. You ever notice, he said, how the worst things that happen to people are the things nobody official ever wrote down? A thing that's in no record didn't happen. That's the only protection we've got out here. We don't report them, and they stay smaller. We start writing them into the real log, sending them south, getting them confirmed and acknowledged and entered into systems, then they're real. Then they've happened. And the more real they are, the bigger they get. He looked at me. You understand what I'm telling you? I said no. Good, he said. Keep not understanding. It's safer. That was the night I started keeping my own notes. Privately. In a small book I kept inside my mattress. I did it because I had begun to be afraid of something specific, something I couldn't quite name yet, and writing it down was the only way I could be sure of it later. I had begun to be afraid of my own memory. Because here is the thing about that storm. The next day, Pell told me there had been no storm. Not in a covering-up way. She said it the way you say an obvious fact. I said the storm last night, the one we shuddered for, and she looked at me with mild concern and said the last storm had been 4 days ago, and I'd slept through most of it. And when I checked the log, even the second book, the entry I had made, the time and the frequency, in my own handwriting, was there. It was real. I could touch it. But Pell had no memory of it, and Aronson, when I asked him, frowned and said he didn't recall hearing my voice on the radio. And were you feeling all right? The isolation does things, you should sleep more. Only Dunmore remembered. And when I went to him, he didn't confirm or deny. He just said, How many days has it been since you arrived? I told him the number. I was sure of the number. I had been counting. He took out the personnel log and showed me the date of my arrival, and we did the arithmetic together, and the number was wrong. By 9 days. According to the log, I had been at the station 9 days longer than I believed. 9 days I could not account for. 9 days that were simply not in me, that left no trace in my memory at all, that the log insisted I had lived. It eats time, Dunmore said. During the bad ones. It takes a little, every storm, from whoever's closest to it. You won't feel it go. You'll just find one day that the calendar's ahead of you. He closed the log. That's why we don't go out in them. The closer you are, the more it takes. Pell lost a year once. Whole year. She doesn't know it. We don't tell her. I asked the question I had been circling for weeks. I asked, what is it? And Dunmore gave me the only direct answer he ever gave me, and it was not an answer at all. It's in the storms, he said. Or it is the storms. Or it makes them, to move around in. We've been watching it for 40 years. We don't report it because reporting it feeds it. And we don't leave because... He stopped. Because it knows us now. It knows our voices. And it doesn't like it when we go. I should have left. I want to be honest about that, because I have replayed it many times. After the conversation with Dunmore there was a window. A flight came every 6 weeks with supplies, and the next one was 11 days out, and I could have been on it. I had the option. I want to be able to tell you I didn't take it because I was brave, or because I wanted to understand, or because I felt some duty. The truth is smaller and worse than that. The truth is that by then I no longer fully trusted that I would survive the leaving. Dunmore's words, "It doesn't like it when we go," had gotten into me. And there was something else, something I am ashamed of and which I think is the real reason most people stayed. The station had become the only place where my experience matched anyone else's. Out in the world, if I told this story, I would be mad. Here, at least, there was Dunmore, who remembered the storm. Here I was not insane. Here I was just frightened. And frightened, in the company of others who are also frightened, is more bearable than sane and alone. So I stayed. The supply flight came and went. I watched it leave the way I had watched the first plane leave, shrinking into the white, and I felt the door close on the part of my life where leaving had been possible. The storms came more often after that. Or I noticed them more. I had learned to read the signs now, the way the radar showed them moving too fast, the way the pressure would start its staircase descent hours ahead, the way Aronson would go quiet and Pell would check the seals. And I had learned the procedure, the real procedure, the one the pilot had warned me about. Shutter the windows. Seal the walkway. Kill the lights. Stay inside. Don't answer the radio. Don't give it your name. Don't go out, no matter what you hear, no matter what it sounds like, no matter whose voice it uses. Because it used voices now. Not just mine. During the storms, the radio would carry them out of the static, voices that belonged to people I had never met, reading reports, calling station designations I didn't recognize, and sometimes, worst of all, voices that called my name from outside, in the wind, low and patient and very close to the walls. The first time I heard my name in the wind I was certain, that it was Aronson, gone out, trapped, calling for help. The voice was right outside the shuttered window, just on the other side of the steel, and it was calling my name, and saying it was cold, it was so cold, please, just open the door, just for a second. And I was halfway to the shutters with my hand out before Pell caught my arm. She had moved across the room without a sound. Her grip was very strong. Aronson's right there, she said. And he was. He was sitting at the radio not 3 meters from me, headset on, exactly where he'd been the whole time. He hadn't moved. He looked at me and shook his head, slowly, and the voice outside kept calling my name in his exact tone, getting more desperate, more cold, and I stood there with Pell's hand around my arm and I understood, in a way I had not understood before, that the thing outside had been listening to us for 40 years and it had learned that the fastest way through a locked door is a familiar voice. We did not open the door. The voice called for 3 hours. Toward the end it stopped sounding like Aronson and started sounding like my wife. My ex-wife, whom I had not spoken to in 2 years, whose voice I had honestly half forgotten, and the thing outside had it perfectly, had the exact way she used to say my name when she was disappointed in me, and it used that, for the last hour, and I sat in the red-green dark with my hands over my ears and Pell sat beside me and did not let go of my arm until the wind died. After that storm, the calendar was ahead of me by 2 days. The equipment began to fail in specific ways. Not breaking, failing selectively, as though something were editing the data. The radar would show the approaching storm and then, as it got close, the storm would vanish from the screen entirely, even though we could hear it, feel it, the pressure dropping and the walls flexing with that slow breathing. The instruments stopped recording the worst of it. The barometer would freeze at a single value during the staircase descent, refusing to log the drops, so that the only record of what was actually happening was the ache behind our eyes and the popping of our ears. It was as if the storms did not want to be measured. As if being measured was a kind of touch they would not permit. Pell explained it to me once, while we were trying to repair the eastern array. We were outside, in the brief calm between systems, both of us bundled past recognition, our breath freezing on our face guards. Instruments are a way of looking, she said, her voice flat through the wind. It doesn't like being looked at. 40 years we've been trying to get a clean reading of one of the bad storms. 40 years. Every single time, the instruments fail at the exact moment they'd catch something. Not before. Not after. The exact moment. You know what the odds of that are. It's not equipment failure. It's being refused. She tightened a frozen bolt. That's what this station is, really. We're not monitoring weather. We're trying to get one good look at the thing in the weather, and it won't let us. 40 years and we've never once seen it clearly. We've only ever seen what it does. I asked her what it does. She was quiet, working the bolt. Then she said, "It takes time. You know that. And it takes people. Not often. But it takes them. And the ones it takes." She stopped working. "The ones it takes, it doesn't kill. That's the thing nobody tells you when you sign on. It would be better if it killed them. It takes them into the storm and the storm goes away and a while later the storm comes back and they come back with it. Different. Wrong. They walk back into the station like nothing happened, and they take up their old work, And they don't remember being gone, and they're almost exactly the same. Almost. I asked her how you could tell the difference. She looked at me through her face guard, and I could only see her eyes, and her eyes were tired in a way I had not seen even in Dunmore's. You can't, she said. Not at first. That's the worst part. You work next to them for weeks before you notice. It's small things. They take readings of storms that aren't there. They log temperatures from days that haven't happened. They answer the radio when it calls their name. She turned back to the bolt. We had a chief before Dunmore. He got taken in a storm I don't know, it's hard to keep the years straight. He came back 4 months later. Walked in the door. We were glad. God, we were glad to see him. And he was him, completely him, for almost 3 weeks. And then one night I came into the control room and he was sitting at the radio with the headset on, transmitting, reading a weather report to someone, and the report was for a storm that wouldn't arrive for another 2 days, and his voice. She stopped. His voice was perfect. But it wasn't pointed at the radio. He was reading the report to the window. To the dark outside. Like he was reporting back. She finished the bolt and stood up. Dunmore took care of it, she said. Don't ask me how. We don't talk about it. But that's why Dunmore's the chief now. We went back inside. I did not sleep that night, or what the clock called night. I lay in my bunk and I listened to the generator throb up through the floor, and I thought about a man sitting in the dark reading the weather to a window, and I understood for the first time what the third building was for. The one set apart by 80 meters of open ground. The one with the locked door. The one that held, Dunmore had said, old equipment. I understood that it did not hold equipment. It held the ones who came back. The storm that should not have existed came in my 11th month. I knew it was different before the radar showed anything, before the pressure moved, before any instrument registered a thing. I knew because Dunmore came into the control room in the middle of a sleep period, fully dressed, having clearly not slept, and he stood in the center of the room with his eyes closed, and he said, to no one, "It's coming back." I asked which one? He opened his eyes. "The big one," he said. "The one from before my time. It comes back every so often. Decades apart. The old chief, the one before the one Pell told you about, the first chief, the one who started this station, he named it in the first log. The only storm we ever gave a name. He called it the long storm because the first time it came it lasted 9 days, and during those 9 days..." Dunmore stopped. "Get Pell. Get Aronson. We have maybe 12 hours. We prepared the station as we had never prepared it. We shuttered everything. We sealed the walkway. We brought extra fuel from the secondary building because Dunmore said the generator would be tested. We filled every container we had with water. And then Dunmore did something I had never seen him do. He unlocked the second log book, the locked drawer, and he took out not the thin book I knew but a much older one beneath it, bound in cracked black, and he opened it on the desk and he read to us. He read from the original log. The first chief's handwriting, 40 years old, in faded ink. And I am going to tell you what it said as closely as I can remember it, because it is the closest thing to an explanation I ever received. The first chief had written that the station was not built to monitor weather. That was the cover, the function it performed for the records, the reason it received funding and supplies, and the reason its data went south to be filed and forgotten. The real reason the station existed was that, sometime in the 1950s, aircraft and ships and remote outposts in that specific region of the high Arctic had begun reporting a particular kind of storm. A storm that did not behave like weather. A storm that absorbed radio signals and returned them altered. A storm that arrived without a front, without a pressure system feeding it, that appeared on radar as a thing moving with intent. And a storm from which, when it passed, people were missing, and to which, sometimes, people were returned. The government, or some part of it, had built the station to watch the place where the storms most often appeared. Not to stop them. They had understood early that they could not stop them. To watch them. To keep them out of the official record because the first chief had discovered, the same thing Dunmore had told me my first month, that the more these storms were documented, confirmed, entered into systems and acknowledged and made real by the apparatus of official reality, the larger and more frequent and more deliberate they became. The storms fed on attention. They fed on being recorded. The station's true job was to be a firebreak. To absorb the storms quietly, locally, off the record, so that they never became real enough to grow. For people, at the edge of the world, holding a door shut against something by refusing to write its name down. The first chief had written one more thing, on the last page Dunmore read to us. He wrote that he believed the thing in the storms was not from outside. He wrote that he had come to believe it had always been there, in that place, long before the station, long before any of us, and that the cold and the dark and the silence of the high Arctic was not its hiding place but its natural medium, the way water is a fish's. He wrote that it did not hunt people the way an animal hunts. He wrote, and this is the sentence I have never been able to get out of my head, he wrote, I no longer think it wants us. I think it is lonely, and it has learned that we are the only things up here that make the kind of sound it remembers, and it is trying, in the only way it knows, to call us home. Then Dunmore closed the book. And the long storm arrived. I cannot fully describe the 9 days that followed, partly because I do not have clear memory of all of them, and partly because the parts one do remember do not arrange themselves into sense. I will tell you what I can. The breathing in the wind was not slow this time. It was fast, and it was close, and it did not feel like breathing from outside the station. It felt like breathing from inside it. The pressure did not descend in steps. It descended in a long continuous fall that did not stop, that went lower than the barometer could read, so that the instrument simply pinned at the bottom of its range and stayed there, and our ears ached, and Aronson's nose began to bleed and would not stop for a day. The radio did not carry single voices. It carried all of them at once, a chorus, every voice the thing had ever collected over 40 years, reading reports, calling names, calling out station designations of stations that I do not think existed, all of it overlapping, all of it perfectly calm, a calm vast murmur in the dark that did not stop for the entire 9 days. And the lights failed. Not the generator held, Dunmore nursed it the whole time. The lights. They would dim and gutter, and in the dimness, in the red-green almost dark, the 4 of us would lose track of each other. I would look up and there would be 3 of us, and I could not have told you which one was gone, and then there would be 4 again, and I could not have told you who had come back, or whether the one who came back was the one who had left. We stopped trusting our own count. Pell wrote our 4 names on the wall in grease pencil, and we would touch them, physically touch each name, and say our own name aloud, to confirm we were still ourselves and still there. On I think it was the 6th day, though the calendar afterward said it was the 3rd, I went to the wall to touch my name, and there were 5 names. A 5th name, in handwriting I did not recognize, below the 4 of ours. I will not write the name here. I called the others over. We stood and looked at it, the 4 of us, and no one had written it, and no one recognized it, and outside the chorus on the radio swelled, and one voice rose above the others, and it read the 5th name aloud, and then it read a weather report, and the report was correct, and it was correct because it was describing the conditions in the room with us. The pressure. The temperature. The 5 of us. It was reporting on us. From inside. Dunmore took the grease pencil and crossed out the 5th name. His hand was shaking. I had never seen his hand shake. It's trying to add itself to the roster, he said. It does this. Every long storm. It tries to become one of us, on paper, in the count. If it succeeds, if we accept the count, if even one of us reads the 5th name as ours, as belonging, as real. He didn't finish. He crossed the name out a 2nd time, and a 3rd, pressing so hard the pencil broke. The name came back twice more over the next days. Each time we crossed it out. Each time the radio read it aloud, patiently, the way you repeat a thing to someone who hasn't heard you. And I understood, somewhere in those days, what the firebreak really was, what the real job really was. It was not watching. It was refusing. The entire purpose of 4 human beings at the edge of the world was to be the thing that, when the lonely vast cold thing in the dark reached out and tried to make itself real by joining the count of the living, looked at it, and said, "No. You are not one of us. You are not on the roster. You did not happen. We do not acknowledge you. We will not write your name down." That is all we were. A refusal, held in the dark, against the thing that had been trying for 40 years to be let in from the cold. On the 9th day, the storm stopped. It stopped the way it always stopped. The wind died, the pressure climbed, the chorus on the radio thinned back into single voices and then into static and then into the ordinary low sea sound it had always made. Dunmore opened the shutters. Outside, the floodlights showed deep fresh snow, smooth, untouched, going on into the dark, exactly as it had after the first storm, exactly as if nothing had happened. We were 4. We checked. We touched the 4 names on the wall and said our own names aloud, and we were 4. Dunmore, Pell, Aronson, and me. The 5th name was crossed out, broken pencil lines over it, and it did not come back. The calendar, when I checked it, was ahead of me by 9 days. Exactly 9. The full length of the storm. I remembered all 9 days, fragments of them, the parts one have told you, and yet the station's clock insisted those 9 days had not contained me, that I had not lived them, even though I had. I have never resolved that. I lived 9 days that the record says I was absent for. I was present for my own absence. That was when I decided to leave. Not out of fear, exactly. The fear had become a kind of weather itself by then, a climate I lived in, no longer an event. I decided to leave because of something I noticed in the days after the long storm, and it is the last thing I am going to tell you, and it is the thing that wakes me at night. In the days after the storm, Aronson began to take readings of storms that were not there. I would find him at the console, logging pressure drops on a clear, calm day, reading the figures aloud to himself in his flat, patient voice. And once, only once, I came into the control room late and found him at the radio with the headset on, transmitting, reading a weather report. The report was for a storm that had not arrived. And his voice was perfect, completely his own, calm and correct. But it was not pointed at the radio. He was facing the window. He was reading the report to the dark outside. To the snow. Reporting back. I told Dunmore. Dunmore looked at me for a long moment, and then he looked at the wall where the names were written, and he said, very quietly, "How many of us are there?" I said 4. "There are 4 of us." And Dunmore said, "Count again. Slowly. And tell me their names." And I counted. And I named them. Dunmore. Pell. Aronson. And me. And Dunmore said, "Aronson left the station 2 years ago. On the supply flight. Before you ever arrived. You've never met Aronson." And he watched my face while he said it, and his eyes were full of a terrible gentleness, the gentleness of a man telling you something he has had to tell people before. "There's 3 of us, son. There's always been 3 of us since you got here. Me and Pell, and the one who came back in a storm before your time and took up the radio and answers when it calls his name. I want to tell you that I argued. That I produced some proof, some memory, some certainty. But the moment he said it, a cold space opened in my mind where my memories of Aronson should have been, and in that cold space I could not find a single moment with him that the thing on the radio could not have placed there. Every conversation. Every smile that was not a smile. Every time he had warned me not to give the storm my name. I could no longer be certain which of my memories were mine, and which had been read to me, patiently, in the dark, in a voice I had learned to trust. I left on the next supply flight. Dunmore did not try to stop me, and the storm did not try to stop me, and the leaving was the most ordinary thing in the world, a small plane lifting off a strip of ice and the station shrinking into the white below until it was a dark speck and then nothing. Pell waved. Dunmore did not. Aronson, the one I remember as Aronson, stood a little apart from them in the snow, by the door of the 3rd building, the building with the locked door, and he did not wave either, and as the plane climbed I watched him until he was too small to see, and I could not tell, at the end, whether he was watching the plane go, or whether he had already turned to face the dark, to report. I have been home for some time now. I am, by every official measure, fine. There is no record that I was ever at that station. I have checked. The designation does not appear in any registry I can find. The contract I signed is not in any system. The money was real, it is in my account, but it came from a payer name that, when I look it up, does not exist. I have begun to wonder whether the station's true firebreak was never just the storms. Whether the refusal to write things down, to make them real, extended to us. To me. Whether I, too, am a thing that did not officially happen. I sleep with the radio on. I know I should not. A doctor told me it would help with the silence, that the brain does better with low ambient sound, and I did not tell her the real reason, which is that I need to hear the static. I need to be able to check it. Because 3 or 4 times now, late, when the house is cold and the wind is up outside, the static has parted, the way water parts around a stone, and in the gap there has been a voice. It is my voice. It reads a weather report. The numbers are for conditions I do not have yet, in a place I no longer live. And at the end it says the station designation, the one I promised not to repeat, and then it says, perfectly calm. Acknowledging receipt. All personnel accounted for. All personnel accounted for. And I lie in the dark and I do the only thing I learned to do up there, the only thing that ever worked, the thing that 4 people at the edge of the world spent 40 years doing against the cold and the dark and the loneliness of something vast that only wanted to be counted among us. I do not answer it. I do not confirm. I do not give it my name. But I have started to wonder how long I can keep not answering. Because it is patient. It has always been patient. And lately, when it reads the roster at the end, when it accounts for all personnel, I have begun to notice that there is one more name on the list than there used to be. And I cannot anymore be entirely sure which one is mine.